Throw it. All right, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of Rocket Fuel Podcast. On today's episode, we have
Mike Guglielmo. I founded Hudson Dorms.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Let's get into it. So, Mike, a lot of entrepreneurs, we believe that they are not born; they're made. Mm-hmm. Was there an instance in your earlier career or your earlier life that snapped in you, that you knew that one day you would grow up to become the entrepreneur that you are today?
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of start with a little bit of my background.
Yeah.
So when I was really early in childhood, I was actually diagnosed as being autistic. Both of my parents were told that I would never be able to live on my own. I went to a special preschool. From there I kind of grew up, how to teach myself how to be social and stuff like that. Ended up, committing to Stevens in May of 2013. Went to Stevens, graduated in engineering management, got my master's in systems. Kind of worked my butt on the way through, trying to figure out how to optimize my course schedule and stuff like that to, put myself in the best position. And then a year after graduating from Stevens, I started having a salary, and I started having more money than I was spending. And I was like, cool, what do I do with this? So I started to put the money towards like the stock market and started reading some stock books and stuff like that. And then I read one book that had said that real estate had a higher rate of return than stocks. And I was like, that's interesting. So then I spent the next year and a half. This is now getting into 2018. Spent the next year and a half trying to learn everything I could about real estate. I would watch This Old House all the time. I would go to a bunch of open houses. I actually worked for this guy who was running an Airbnb in Hoboken as his maintenance guy. And I was doing that to get a little bit of extra cash to really start to dive into real estate. And then I took a shower one day. I'm a morning shower guy, and I was taking the shower at night. It was like a 6 p.m. shower, and while I was in the shower, I remembered back to my time at Stevens and the struggles that I had with trying to find housing. And on top of that, I remember, thinking about like some of those options that Stevens has had at the time. And then I, got out of the shower. I was really excited, and just thinking like, wow, like what a cool business opportunity. It didn't have a name for another month, but then we eventually named it Hudson Dorms. But so that's kind of like the quick, rough and dirty origin story. But yeah, I mean, coming out of school, I had no interest in entrepreneurship. I didn't know that was going to be the path that I ended up choosing. And who knows, it might not be my path in 10 years from now. I might be doing something else. But I definitely think that it's something that I learned a lot, as opposed to, I definitely don't think it was something that you're born with. I think it's something that you find an interest in. And then when you find the interest, it starts to develop around you, and you start to build the skill set required to make it successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that too. I think that especially in your earlier days of entrepreneurship, there's going to be a lot of failures, and there's going to be a lot of times that things just don't go your way. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind just describing some kind of instance that happened to you in which things just went completely wrong, and in like the earlier days of Hudson Dorms.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people think that entrepreneurship is rosy-colored glasses. I think a lot of people look at it in rosy-colored glasses. And there's failures every day. We strive to be the best that we can, but that doesn't mean we're constantly in a learning environment where we're recognizing challenges and working through them in real time. I think one of the biggest challenges that we had to face was COVID, and that was emotionally very taxing. So I remember the date, August 3rd, 2020, about in like June or July. I don't think you guys were students when this happened, but Stevens announced that they were going to have in-person classes around June or July, and all the students were super excited, and so were we. We got to have all of our students. We were excited to have them all move in. We were getting all their apartments ready. And then August 3rd, the same day that our interior designer started, we found out that Stevens decided to not hold classes. The way that I found out was that I had a student email me saying, hey, so Stevens isn't having classes this semester. What happens with our housing? And I was like, this is great. So, I mean, you know, you always go into a little bit of action mode first. Like, I guess that's how I operate, instead of like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. We went to action mode. Is actually how we created the concept of doing Hudson Dorms events, because we wanted to. It was the Hudson Dorms college experience, where we wanted to recreate a college experience for students in Hoboken that didn't have Stevens to create a college experience for. We wanted to help create that, so we had like Among Us event, and we had a movie event and stuff like that kind of helped connect some people. So I would say COVID was probably one of the toughest challenges that we had.
Yeah, that's a pretty hard obstacle to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just more so because you were working as a data science, correct? Before you decided to then pivot and then start your own company. Can you talk about like what's the difference in like culture and feeling from like working, you know, like a 9 to 5 versus like starting your own venture?
Yeah, about 40 hours a week. So, I mean, I work pretty consistently. So as an example, this weekend I was working on, you know, some strategy items, some, you know, finance stuff, you know, and that's what I do. I was, you know, managing our books on a Sunday while, like, in halftime during the Steelers game. So I think that, like, culturally, what's cool is we got to kind of build the culture to what we view as, we got to build the culture to what we view the best culture can be. The cool thing about that is we get to bring in people that are truly passionate about our students, and we get to build a whole culture around that. So the way that our, you know, I'll call it our slogan, it's convenient, connected, caring. It's on the shirt. And so, you know, our goal is to provide convenient spaces, connect our students together, and then create an environment where our students really feel cared for. And from a culture perspective, you know, we bring in people that are going to care about our students. So, you know, Ashley is, you know, all the time spotlighting our students, on campus a lot, talking to everyone, and really starting to understand them. Likewise, Dennis, who runs our maintenance program, is alumni of Stevens. I know Mike's, Dennis has been in your apartment a few times, and you know, the difference is we want it when someone has maintenance requests go down, you know, something goes down, instead of it being like, oh yeah, someone's going to come by and take care of it, it's Dennis is going to come by and take care of it. And then all of a sudden, when there's a humanization of it, which allows for, you know, everyone to just feel like heard, understood, and, you know, like thought about. So
yeah, I would say, at least in my experience of Hudson Dorms, that it's been very, very personal. You know, I got to know you, I got to know Dennis, a couple other guys on the staff too. So I think that's definitely an advantage when it comes to business as well. Are there any other businesses that you guys have been competing with at Hudson Dorms? I mean, I know there's, of course, like individual landlords in Hoboken that lease out to students, but in terms of competition as well as growth, how does it look like for Hudson?
Yeah, so I'll touch on competition first. I always have come to the belief that the less you look at competition, usually the better off you are. So what we like to do is we like to hyper-focus on our customers, so all the students who are living with us. And if we just consistently listen to them and upgrade what we can do, then we believe that will lead to more success than if we were to just try to stare at our competition, see what they're doing, and then, you know, kind of trying to copy what they're doing. There's always a certain amount of, you know, learning from people that are making other decisions. That's prudent, but our real focus is on, like, just hyper-focusing on our students. And as far as a growth perspective, what's actually pretty cool is about 70% of the students who live with us actually come through referrals. And you know, whether it's a friend or, you know, Greek life or anything like that. And the reason why we find that the reason why that happens is because people live with us. We re-sign students at a really high rate as well, and we allow that to be our growth. So it creates the growth organically, which means that it's natural, it's reoccurring from a more business standpoint, but you know, we allow that to fuel us, and then, you know, as we continue to make strides and continue to learn about our students more, we'll allow that to help us grow.
Yeah, That reminds me, Ashley Mukun was saying that like the best startups make their competition irrelevant because their differentiating factor is just not, oh, we do this thing slightly better for competition, but they have like that unique perspective that they just do way better than anyone else. And also about the key thing with any successful startup is building something, even if it's a small number of users like starting out, build something that they really love rather than what like a large people really just like, and then
100%.
that kind of like allows like, you know, that organic growth you were talking about. So how did you build that base in the first place? Because once you have like a solid customer base and you know like your product, your service is really good, it allows that to grow. But how did you like get that in the first place, like your first students to live with you?
Yeah, so we dorm stormed CPH. That was our first the first customers we ever had were dorm storming CPH. And then really from there, one of the things that kind of there's a belief that I have that you kind of like luck is a what's the way to describe it? It's you cast a wide net for luck, and the wider of a net you cast, the luckier you'll get in opportunities in return. So one of the things we did in February of 2020, we kind of discovered a parents page, and we asked for permission to post in there about an open house. And so we had an open house. We had about 60 people come in, and that was one of the first things that really started to get students to know who we are. And what we did is, you know, all the students came by, parents came by too, and they got to meet us. And then I think through those conversations, they really got to understand that we were nowhere near where we are today. But at that point, we still had that like fire to get better. And you know, we would say like, hey, like, you know, we're gonna try our best to make sure that you guys are taken care of. And I think so that was like the way we kind of kicked it off. Just catching the wide net, figuring out what opportunities were available, and then, you know, we got lucky with one that worked out really well. And then from there, those students had friends to bring in, and, you know, it really starts to build a cascading effect from there.
Yeah, kind of like a word of mouth kind of thing.
Very word of mouth-esque, correct.
Do you envision a future where Hudson Dorms is at other universities, you know, maybe at a university in Jersey City or another university nearby?
Yeah, I think that there's two things I mentioned. One, it's challenging because I have an experience as a Stevens student that is almost impossible to replicate. So, like, I went to Pierce. I, you know, took classes in Babbio. When we talk about like distance to campus for some of our locations, like I know what those distances feel like because I've lived it as a student. Running home because I forgot my homework or something like that, you know, or halfway through I forgot my laptop charger. You know, those type of things happen, right? At other schools, we have to make sure that we bring in individuals to have that personalized experience and passion to ensure that we can provide a similar level of service to the students that we house in the future. But I think our goal is to continue to make an impact on students, not just in Stevens, in Hoboken, but, you know, wherever there's an opportunity that we can come in and make a big difference, that's where we target next. So,
talking more about like your Stevens experience. So
Yeah.
you talk about how like you use the actual experience of being a Stevens alumni to connect with your residents.
Yeah.
But in terms of just like skills, like both technical or just like soft skills, how did like your Stevens experience, the classes you took or organizations you're in, prepare you for being like an entrepreneur, like this things you do like right now?
So I learned Excel pretty well while I was at Stevens, and that actually was really helpful. I think like some of the biggest things that I learned, as I kind of mentioned with some of the autism stuff when I was younger, my time at Stevens, I was able to spend time with very outgoing individuals. I think that helped build a lot of the character that I am today, which helped, you know, being surrounded by really smart individuals. I also think that the management of my courses and like, because I kind of had a backwards schedule. I graduated a semester early with a master's, and then I also, you know, well, because of that, I then had to like finagle everything around, and I dropped out of co-op halfway through. So I had to like piece together and then convince different people at Stevens that I could do what I was doing, and I had to take 2 design classes at the same time. And those type of skills were also very helpful to now, if I'm trying to have a conversation with the Hoboken Business Alliance, who is someone that we want to, start to build a relationship with, how can we, setting up those conversations in a way to keep, now our goal is keeping the students in mind, and at the time keeping my master's in mind. I can learn how to create the correct conversations to make that happen. So I think those type of like soft skills are really useful now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, as somebody who works in real estate, I'm sure you deal with a lot of problems, constant problems. Especially Hoboken of all areas with all the flooding, all the rain, and all that stuff. So, what would you say is your biggest advice for somebody who's trying to get into real estate? What are some things that they should look out for, and what are some things that they should definitely be prepared for before they get into real estate?
This will be a little bit of a hot take. So I think that when you're in real estate, when you're in any business, you should always be a student of the game, constantly trying to figure out what you can learn, and just try to learn what you can. So in my case, it was going to open houses, watching this old house. I would read books on psychology. I would read books about. I actually read the entire tax code. Well, not the entire tax code, but like the introductory tax code to residential real estate. So I understood how like taxes were applied to depreciation and stuff like that. But I think what happens in the end of the day is people tend to be over prepared and then miss the opportunity altogether. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of like jumping in, especially for those that are young. Like let's say I jumped into this and it was a total disaster. I would have then been 25 and had a failed business on my resume. I'm probably still better off than if I didn't do it at all. So most of the time, it's really just jumping in and trusting your ability to figure it out. And then if it doesn't work, that's okay, because you just you move back in with your parents. You try to find if it really goes bad, you work at a fast food chain or something like that for 2 years until you build some more skills, and then maybe you build a large sales skill and then go sell for 2 years, and then you can dive back into something else. And then the downside is not really as much as people think. So
right.
Yeah.
I think one thing that makes real estate, people view it as a downside, is it's pretty capital intensive to get started. So I was just wondering if you could talk about how did you get started with getting your first property, and what was that experience like? Did you have to renovate it, and how did you then rent it out?
Yeah, so I'll actually speak to my brother's experience a little bit on this. So my brother owns a building in Hoboken, and there's something called house hacking, where you rent out one of the units, so you live in one of the units and rent out the other 3 in a 4-family, and you can get I'll call it 5% down FHA loans on that, and that's a way that makes the building a lot less capital intensive, because you're able to come in with a lot less money, and that's just an example of and then from there you can do some other things. So one of the things that he did is he actually what's called sold points, which means that he raised his interest rate to lower his down payment. And the greater picture of what I mean there is that all you have to do is understand what levers you have to pull given the situation you're in, and especially if it's your first property or something like that, you can pretty easily figure out what levers, what opportunities you have available. You have the time to figure it out, so it makes it a lot easier, and then just execute from there. So but I think in all cases, and this generally holds true, constraints typically allow for creativity, because the more you're constrained, the more creative you have to be. And so it's when your back's against the wall is when you come with your most creative ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to adapt and learn on the fly and stuff is something very well important. And something that you mentioned that I find pretty fascinating, all the books you read, including the entire tax code. Not that many people are willing to make those sacrifices. Not that many people are willing to spend the time to learn all these things before they hop into something. And I think that's something that you definitely did that set you apart from anybody else. So what other sacrifices do you believe that you made that made you as successful as you are today?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll mention is I wouldn't want to ever cast judgment against someone that didn't want to like work as hard as I do or anything like that, right? Life is about what you want it to be, not about like, there's a really good book on, it's Clayton Christensen. It's how you measure your life or something like that. I can't remember the exact book, but it talks about people tend to use like financial success as like a measure of how successful you were in life. And what happens is I'm 28, but what I've done research on is as you get older, the things you care about tend to less and less be about money and more to be like how much time you guys spend with your family. And that's why I really don't like to, I'm careful around talking about the amount that I work and things like that, because I don't want to ever have someone else feel judged for not making that decision, right? But I definitely think as far as sacrifices, there's definitely some friends that I feel like I'm not as close with. I lost my dad during COVID, and I remember the week before he passed, I was on a Zoom call building a bed, and it was on Easter, right? So on Easter I was talking to my family, but I was kind of like not fully engaged in the conversation because I was building the bed, and then my father had an aneurysm a week later, and that's one of those moments where it's, you're picking between, you're not necessarily picking between those two things. Obviously, in hindsight, I would have rather been engaged, knowing, but, there's relationships and things that you lose when you're doing something with the time, and if it's not working, then it's something else that those connections are sometimes tough.
Like time is definitely the most valuable currency
Absolutely.
you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
Only being 28 years old, you still have a really bright and definitely a lot more exciting future coming ahead. So that's
I hope so.
Yeah. But yeah, so what are some, or what do you envision Hudson Dorms to be like in the next 5 or even 10 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that we're going to allow the future of Hudson Dorms to be guided by the students that are living, the students that are living with us and are going to be living with us in the future. And I think that really comes down to listening to our students. Every year there's new things that we've learned. Tweaking how to have events, how to advertise events, how to make sure that our students really feel understood during the housing selection process, so that they feel like they had choice, feel like they truly had choice. They really were understood, and then from there it's trying to. One of the things I really focus on, now having a team of 8, is how do I make sure that as the company grows, I'm able to build through that growth, build everyone else's careers. Because I'm not responsible for just my own career, I'm responsible for everyone's careers. So what can we do to make sure that they all are continually in an opportunity to learn, continually in an opportunity to grow and succeed. So those are 2 things that I focus on, and then we'll let the growth take us as it takes us.
Sounds like you're very, very passionate about what you do, and that's for somebody to say that they care more about the growth of their employees as well, and not as much about the growth of their company is really, really impactful. And I think that I would love to work for a company like that. A company that's going to help me as much as I help it. I think that's a great return that you're offering.
Yeah. It's still a work in progress learning how to execute on that. But that's the idea, right? And then what does that mean on a day-to-day is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still learning these things. I'm appreciative. My mother actually huge influence on what we do. She manages a lot of people, and so she helps coach me through a lot of those conversations. But it takes time to learn. So I just, again, I don't want to, taking a little rose-colored glasses off, it's, these are challenging conversations to have, because sometimes the best growth conversation is one that's a hard conversation about like what someone did wrong, right? Because that's how people grow, is by having those conversations. So those are things I have to learn how to have the conversation, but when to have it, and how to phrase things so it doesn't come down as being too critical, but instead comes down to like, how can we look forward and build the skill instead of just like, hey, you suck because of this. Right. So. Yeah.
And another question I have,
Please.
like, about growing your company, you know, as like you expand the number of buildings and also the number of people you have on board. How have you kind of like navigating, recognizing what skills that you have that you do well, and also recognizing what skills are needed in the company that you would need to like delegate, and then how do you go about like finding the best people for that job?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I think it just takes a little bit of, I haven't done this yet, but there's one concept where you can like ask like a close, not like a best friend, but like a close friend, like for like honest advice. So one of the things, I guess I'm fortunate that I have my mom as an example where I can kind of like have an honest conversation with her about like, you know, what areas I think we're succeeding in, what areas do we think we need to work on. And there's an overarching concept where if you can have no skills other than recruiting and leadership and run a successful business.
Right.
And so those are the two most valuable skills, and then from there everything else is just, you know, kind of nice to haves. But I think it really boils down to that, where it's I think what happens is you have to understand yourself. You know, so for me, I like data, so I'm pretty good with like that type of stuff. I'm pretty good with the back end stuff. And something I had to learn was like sales and marketing. It wasn't as much of a skill set that I had, and I had to spend a lot of time. You know, I read a ton of marketing books, I read a ton of sales books, I listen to a ton of people in those spaces to start to build up those skills. And now that I've, you know, done a bunch of that, now I can, when I go to hire, you know, Mike and Bree, who are, you know, the people that help explain how Hudson Dorms helps students, they, like, I understand what skill set is required to make sure that they're truly listening to who's living with us, and at the same time can properly guide them through that conversation, help make a decision as to what's best for them housing wise. So I think that would, you know, that's kind of how I did it.
Right. So it's about like knowing enough about like these other domains of the business to know how to find the people to
Correct.
do it.
Yep, that's exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. Going back to like what you said about like having the skills of leadership and like recruiting. Did you like always kind of consider yourself a leader, like growing up or as a student, or has that kind of been a skill you've had to like get better at and develop as a founder?
I think it's both. You know, there were I'll call it mistakes that I had. So like I think in high school, I was on the track team, and I was the captain of the track team. But like, you know, what usually happens, I was a senior and I was also the best runner on the team, and so that kind of just like lends itself to being the captain. And I remember I had like one thing where I had a pretty prominent role in trying to beat our rival school, and I remember I had like a 2-minute speech about like, you know, like the day before, and I remember that conversation being more self-centered than it should be, because that's what my mind was on. And I had to, like, you know, kind of reviewing that, and I was like, you know, okay, this is what I should have said. I should have been like, hey, like, you know, what can we each do to help our collective goal of, you know, beating Clarkstown North? So I think, but I held like leadership positions throughout my time at Stevens, and I think that like through those opportunities, I got to learn some of the mistakes early on, which help now when I don't, you know, mess up a budget for the, oh my God, what's the name of the people that do the budgets for clubs?
Treasurer?
Not the treasurer, the RSO. Anyway, so you know, the people that manage the budgets, right? If you don't submit the budget, then you don't get the money for next year.
Oh,
so I
SGA.
yes, thank you. So like, you know, managing SGA budgets, understanding what they're looking for, and then trying to optimize for that. Those are some lessons I got to learn throughout my time at Stevens, that I now gonna utilize those skills and those lessons for Hudson Dorms. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say that I was like so focused as a recruiter when I was at Stevens or something like that. It's a skill that you learn.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. For sure.
It's definitely hard being a leader sometimes, because you want to lead, but you don't want to do the work sometimes. But you know that you can't listen to your feelings, you just have to do it anyways. I think that's what really makes a good leader, is somebody who doesn't listen to their feelings and just performs and goes out there and does it anyways.
It's interesting. I tap into emotions a lot, from a positive, the goal of that being positive. So, if I go back to hard conversations, right? When you have a hard conversation with someone, it's usually emotionally taxing going into it. But the thing to remember is, like, if you care about the person, the conversation that you have in that moment will mean so much more for them 2 years down the road. So it's almost like because of the emotional caring about them that you're almost like more driven to have the conversation than, and you have to like reframe it in your mind where you're more focused on that long-term benefit for the short-term pain. And so that's kind of the angle. But yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot of like those, kind of day-to-day struggles of trying to manage my own emotions. If there's a rough day in the office for, someone on the team, I have to be able to calm my body down, calm myself down first, and then be able to, walk them through the challenges that they have.
Especially when you said 8 people on the team,
8 people
including
on the team,
yourself?
That does include yourself,
And
yes.
including yourself too. So, there's a lot of things to manage. Everyone has their own roles. Everyone has, like their own responsibilities. And I'm sure you oversee the entire operation. So it's a lot of stress. And, what are some things that you do to just escape everything, relieve the stress? And I saw you on a skateboard once, skateboarding around town.
Yeah.
Something fun to do.
It's actually funny. That's one of the things I'm working on right now. As I talk about this a lot, I'm not a finished product. That's an area that I need to grow more, is how to actually get myself to relax. I have hobbies, of course. I was the president of the Frisbee team at Stevens, so I play Frisbee. I'm a big Steelers fan, so I'll watch the Steelers. We just beat the Raiders last night, so what up?
So you got the socks on.
Yeah, of course. I got the Pittsburgh Steelers socks on. I do things like that, but it's tough. I actually have a hard time winding down and a hard time just like relaxing. So I really don't have a great answer for that, and that's why. So.
Sports. 5.
Oh yeah, well I played Frisbee. Volleyball. Yeah, right. It doesn't do
volleyball, basketball.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's tough. So that's one to work on.
And I think especially like an added stress as a founder is like you have a team of 8, so which means like 7 people's careers are now like your responsibility. So how do you deal with that pressure? Is that something that's kind of like you feel like it's always on your shoulder, or do you just like focus on like the business and like just keeping it running so that they can keep their careers? Because I imagine it must be taxing that like, hey, like if this business like doesn't go like the right way, then that's like 7 other people who like also put their careers on line.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been fortunate to not ever have put us. I'm careful with some of the decisions that we make. Not for lack of a better word, taking on too much risk where it actually puts people's careers in jeopardy. But yeah, I definitely think it's not something I think about too much, just because I trust my ability to solve problems in the moment. So most of when it comes from a career perspective, most of my thought is actually around making sure everyone feels connected, like everyone on the team feels connected to our mission, more than the concern about the company unfolding.
Okay. So that everyone is there.
Yeah, right. So I'm more focused on the future and the positive as opposed to like the downside and the negative. Yeah.
That's a great way to look at stuff.
Exactly.
Always on the positive,
Right. How can we improve?
Yeah, I can tell you're a glass half full kind of guy.
Yeah.
This is a glass half
Right.
empty.
Not all the way full, because if it's all the way full, then I'm just like way too optimistic. then you take on unnecessary risks that jeopardize everything, right? But it's that right balance between generally it's good to be optimistic, as long as you're not like over optimistic. Life is a balance. Yeah.
So, Mike, from what I learned from you is that you love to read. And then you mentioned a lot of times that you read this book in marketing, this book on tax codes. I keep on bringing it up.
Yeah.
It's so funny. But a lot of people, especially nowadays, do not spend the time reading. A lot of us are on social media. A lot of us are on YouTube, watching videos, consuming things through that nature. I think it's important to bring back reading. I think it's important for, especially people my age, to get back into reading. If you were to recommend maybe 3 to 5 books that really, really changed your life, really, really impacted you, what would you say those 3 books? Let's go with 3 books.
3 books. Okay, so in what? It's like real estate books or just business or just
real
life in general?
Estate, business, or life in general.
So the first one that comes to mind is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. There's a guy who I listen to a lot. I started listening to him like 3 years ago, but now he's popular. His name's Alex Hormozy. Okay, so he has 2 books actually now. One called $100 Million Offers and the other one $100 Million Leads. Those are both really good. And the thing I like about him, something that I learned through him a lot, is the mathematics behind business. And like, instead of like, oh yeah, you want to create an offer, that's great. It's like putting math of like, what does a great offer look like? And then it's like, perceived likelihood of, or it's value add times something divided by perceived likelihood of achievement plus time, effort, and sacrifice. And when you build it a little more mathematically, it helps you actually like start to break down what you need to work on, and then you actually like identify where your constraint is in the business and flow from there. There's a few that come to mind, like Rework by Jason Fried. It's a really good book. That one talks like it kind of like undermines a lot of like the typical logic of business. So like for example, it talks about like, well, not every business's goal is to get as big as possible. And so it kind of like starts to unwind some of those conversations. That one's really good. But I actually listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. I should be a little more specific. It's not that I just read. I'm constantly, YouTube podcasts, obviously audiobooks as well. I'm blanking on some of the ones I really like, but yeah, I'd probably stick with those for now.
Those books.
But I listen like Gary Vee, I really like. Because I think he has a nice approach to empathetic management and something that stuff that I could really attach to. So
yeah, I feel like especially Gary Vee. From what I've learned from him is he's more of a leader than he is a boss, and that was one thing that for me growing up, I didn't really understand the concept of that until, believe it or not, actually one of my sports teams. I was in soccer and I saw the way that my coach was, and to me, he was more of a leader than a boss.
That's awesome.
He rallied us up, he spoke to us on a very personal level, and I think that kind of attitude was the reason why we were so successful over the years. And I think that being a leader versus being a boss is 10 times more valuable, especially in today's workspace.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel like from what you're telling me, that you're definitely more of a leader, an actual leader, than a boss.
Try my best.
Yeah.
Always work in progress.
Yeah, and I think, Marissa, to continue that conversation, it's not necessarily about reading books, but I think that's something you really said, is that to be like a lifelong learner.
Yes,
and especially because like whether that's learning through reading books or like podcasts. I also listen to a lot of podcasts too, just like for knowledge and stuff like that. So I think that's also really important. As for like when you had to like learn all of these things, was your kind of approach like, okay, I want to do like X, like whether it was like get into real estate or like start my own business, I'm going to consume as much like knowledge as I can to learn how to do it and then dive in? Or is it kind of more of like, okay, let's just get started and we like learn as we go?
I think it's a little bit of both. The short answer is yes to the first part, where I wanted to dive into real estate, and so real estate psychology being related to real estate, right? And that's kind of the angle I took. But I also think you have to enjoy it, because you can't work on something for so long that you really don't enjoy.
Exactly.
So I think it has to be both. But that's kind of why you get to choose in life where you go. And so for me,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed real estate. I come from a family of civil engineers, so it kind of made sense from that point too. And then it's like, oh great, real estate. Like, okay, cool, I'm gonna learn everything about this. And that's when I got a little obsessive, so I just started to like learn. And I really enjoyed learning and stuff like that. So, and then it kind of worked out. And now I'll like specifically target specific skills I need to learn. So for now, I learned a lot about managing and leadership and, you know, how to, actually one of the big internal things that we have is managing expectations. And so how do we continue to manage out our internal expectations? So like what Ashley does on a day versus like what Mike Capri does on a day versus what Dennis does on a day, and our students' expectations, so that they understand that like, you know, we're not like magic. We're not magic. Like if something isn't working, it's not gonna immediately get fixed. Just because it takes time to like actually solve these things. Amazon is only as fast as it is.
Yeah.
But they know at the same time that like their expectations that we're gonna try our best, and that we're gonna respect their privacy and we're gonna listen to them and understand and make sure they feel safe in their spaces. Right. So it's you know, it's that. Yeah.
Well, Mike, me and Sparthy really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And honestly, as someone who is a resident of Hudson Dorms, I appreciate what you do.
Yeah,
and what you guys do. I think that you guys are making a really good impact, not only for Stevie students, but just overall. I could tell just the way that you talk to me. You're a natural leader, and I really think that the future of Hudson Dorms is very, very bright. And before you leave, I know we had a conversation about this before the podcast started, but I'm sure that the audience is probably a little curious as the shirt
Oh yeah.
you're wearing. So if you don't mind, just describing like why you decided to wear that shirt today and what it means to you.
Yeah, no, so the shirt, this is at our welcome back event. So all the students that came back to grab their keys, we wanted to create an environment where when they come by, it's not just like, here's your keys and you go, but you get to hang out for a few minutes and you get to feel loved, and you get to feel like welcome back with like, you know, 2 arms hugging you. And that's the goal, right? So what this shirt represents for us is our student. So this is a bunch of students signed it. So this is Mike right here. And we wanted everyone to feel connected together and welcomed back. So the shirt is a representation of the students that are living with us and a little bit of helping us focus on what matters most.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Mike.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
You know, appreciate the conversation, and hopefully I could be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. Awesome.